And now you see why you can start. I want to thank Skillsmatter for me being here, and Mr. Build Doctor, Julian Simpson, for getting me into this talk. Who knows something about DevOps? Who has heard about the term, or is this, for who is it the first time he's, okay, guess the term is known. DevOps, a cultural and professional movement. That's how Adam Jacob described it. A bit of my background. I'm an independent consultant, and I've been over several years, worked in different roles. I've been a developer, tester, system administrator, manager, whatever. And it's funny when you go around and then you see like, oh, we don't trust the other guys, we don't do this. It was an interesting experience just by changing roles. I have an interest in Agile in general and infrastructure. I have a background from system administrator, but okay, I'm a bit of a dual. I write a blog called Just Enough Developed Infrastructure, where you can find more information. And I had, let's say by sheer accident, started the first DevOps days in Belgium. And from there, the word DevOps took off. So for the good of the bad, but this is the word we got. And recently, I'm proud to have joined the Qatar Consortium, which is an independent organization that delivers advice on Agile and other stuff. Kind of a Gartner, but less fluffier. So what's your background check? Okay, how many, who's developer from background? That's quite a few. Who's system administrator? Any other roles left? No, okay. So we don't have the analysts, we don't have the testers, or do we have testers? No? No guys from the networking, storage? No? But you do all. So, so what I wanted to say is that the whole thing is not limited to the guys from development and not limited to the guys from operations. So everybody's welcome to join in the conversation. And to give you an idea, I made a picture a while ago that described like the world we live in. Like the system administrators live on their island, developers live on their island. There's like the management on the other island, somewhere in between there's the testers and the architects and security. So everybody has an interest in thinking about DevOps. So it's not only about this little trip going from that side to the other side. There are, of course, people who say we are exclusive. So these guys are like the pastor operators from hell, you know, the grumpy people, the guys that talk about tools, 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 and it's us against the others. I'm a DevOps, so you're a sysadmin, but I'm a DevOps. So that's not what we want to talk about today. So if you're looking for tools today, you can still leave. Sorry, today no tooling. Tooling we can do in the pub. I'm happy to talk about tools, but DevOps mentality has nothing to do about selecting the right tool. So I guess you're all familiar with the problem. Devs and ops not working together to achieve the results. But then now you should know that it's not a technical problem. It's a human problem. It's about people working together. So what I usually hear when I'm in these different groups, we don't trust the other guys. So it doesn't matter what group you come in, we don't trust the others. So the premise of today is it's a trust problem. There's lots of things you can talk about, but if you don't trust the other, okay, you're going to have a problem. So that's my premise for today. You might not agree, but that's where we are going to talk about. So for me, starting a DevOps mentality or culture is restoring that trust in an organization. I found some help in this book. I don't know if who is familiar with this book? Nobody? Okay, that's good. Well, the book explains that traditional business formula. You have a great strategy. Your company is going, that direction. And then you have the guys executing stuff. They do it brilliantly, and that gives you the results. But there's a hidden factor, which is trust. And trust can change the whole game. What happens? When trust goes down, your speed and your cost go up. The speed goes down, costs go up. When you increase trust, the speed goes up and costs go down. That's what we are seeking now. So the book goes on talking about a tax dividend. So let's say you have your strategy and your execution, which is 100, and let's say if you have a trust tax, you will deliver only 60 instead of the 100 you are aiming for. Same with a tax of 90. But you can increase things by getting that trust dividend up, and then you get more. Trust is a function about character and competence. I know character, you might think it's built into a person, we can't change that. That's probably the hardest thing to change. But competence, of course, we can change. There's different levels of trust. You can trust yourself, your relations, the people you work with, the whole organization, if you want to. And then you can go on to market and societal. Okay, today we're mainly going to talk about the 3 top ones. The others I leave to the philosophical people to build on that trust. Self-trust. Do you trust yourself in your work? Is there anybody who doesn't trust himself? There's one. Okay. Well, the truth is, we trust people that make things happen. So do you make things happen? Because most people have the feeling that they make things happen. But still, can others trust you? And this was what made me thinking. So we judge the others by their behavior, but we judge ourselves by our intentions. So you might have the intention, let's say, oh, I really want to make things secure. I really want to have that backup. I really have to do. But if you don't, it's only an intention. The others will perceive it like it's just an intention. And it's not something you do. But the other way around, you say to the other, you yourself, you evaluate the people by their behavior. So this is important to think that whatever you're not doing but you want to do doesn't build on the trust problem. So trust, character and competence. Character by itself, integrity and intent. So we can have the intent and the integrity about doing stuff, and we need the competence to do things. Capabilities and results. Very important, the results. You can have like all the capabilities in the world. Well, we all have a talent to do stuff. We all have an attitude to do the stuff. We have the skills, the knowledge and the style. But we still need to do these things. So it's not enough. So you can have like walk over fire, but we all have the talent, the skills and knowledge, but do you have the attitude? So it's important to keep that in mind. So skills, capabilities, knowledge, haha, this is where the tools kick in. Haha. Well, I personally love technology, so I don't mind talking to you about technology, but like I said, it's going to be in the pub. It's not going to be today. All that technology talk and being good at your job reminds me of what people are saying about craftsmanship. So you get really good at the things you do. You really build on that tools. But there's a lot more. So technology is only one part. But if you have an interest in management, your social skills, your financial skills, you might be interested, but somebody has to pay, and if you can evaluate the cost of things you do, that's an important skill you have. So if you only evaluate things by technology, you're limited in your view. The way you communicate. Okay. This is probably what you think now. So, all this thing to learn, do I really have to? Is there somebody who knows all of these? Would you consider those things important? Yes? Do you practice them as much as your technological skills? No? But they can make a huge difference. Of course, the broader your knowledge you have on all these different domains, the more balanced your actions get. So you might choose a technology, but see that it's financially not feasible, and that it drives like other people insane in the company because they already made a decision. So getting that balance right is important, and that you can only get at if you look at it at a lot of different angles. So it's not about the devs taking over ops or ops taking over devs. So you don't have to know, you don't have to have the skills of all these things, but it helps to have knowledge about these things. Because in the end, even if you don't know these things, it's about collaboration with the people you trust. So people ask me, so we are now coding everything in the infrastructure. Yes, so we can deploy it. Cool, cool. So will we be stop being a sysadmin? No, you might still have people taking care of the infrastructure itself, doing other stuff. So not everybody has to have every skill in the pool. But working together is where you create your scale yourself. If you have to do it all yourself, some people can, but you fail to grow in your organization with that. So when you have the competence to do things, you can achieve results. And results, what's important, that you take the responsibility. So don't say, my job is only to provide the operating system. My job is only to provide this. Right? That's not what gives you the result. Result is what drives and gets things done for the business. And with that in mind, you have to re-see your actions, because if you stop at a certain level, it's not worth a lot. When you think about the results, finish the job. So not saying, okay, I just did this, well, I leave it up to the other to finish the job. And when you do it, finish it strong, make that it's absolutely finished when you do these things. I promised you guys a bit of bootstrapping, which is a verb. So it's not like a fluffy thing to do. So from a self-trust level, I would say you make a backlog, the things you want to learn. So you pick an item that you want to make it happen. Not too big, just like in agile estimation, something you can make happen. You pick it, and you define the results and the competence you need. And you learn about that stuff. Then you do it, and you know, it only gives you trust in yourself if you do these things. It's not the theory, it's not the knowledge, it's the skills of doing these things that make the difference. Of course, then you continue to check whether you have that result, and you make something, an action out of it. Does that make sense? So to rephrase that, as a person, I want to develop these capabilities. I want to achieve results, and when I fail, I want to learn and improve. Okay? So you're probably thinking, so where's that DevOps stuff coming up? So it's that simple. Improve yourself. And that's the first part you need to do. It's not saying, okay, the others are doing it wrong, so they have to improve. No, you have to improve yourself. I'm not telling you what skill you have to improve, because everybody wants to work on different things. But first reflect on yourself, on what you need to get the results, so others can start trusting you. On a side note, I want to say, I'm not saying that a manager is not a person, but a manager, he needs to help you in these things. So, because for him it's important, the two things below, like the speed and the cost, is the benefit that you will get from the whole story. So if he can help people to gain that trust in the organization, to get the results, to get the competences, then he has done a great job. If he doesn't support the people and he just says, okay, I ignore your results, I don't give you the space to improve your skills, you're only allowed to follow a technical course on product X because that's the most valuable. If you don't let people expand their competences and their view, in my opinion, you're doing it wrong. Second level, relational trust. So this is where you reach out to the others. So you get like everybody together and start talking. So this guy can be the developer, this guy can be the ops, but this can be the tester, so it doesn't really matter. You just get together. In that respect, Agile already has done a great job. So they get like the testers, the analysts, the customer, the project manager together, but somehow there's still a few people like the ops guys, like the sysadmins, who didn't get in that group. And that, I must say, was my biggest frustration when I started DevOps. It's like they were all about opening up to different teams. But then when you asked, okay, I'm from another team, can I join? I said, oh, no, it's, well, we don't know how to handle that. It's a pity because it should have been open and there's nothing in Agile that should be against that. In that way, I'm also saying that DevOps by itself doesn't have like a different philosophy than Agile. It's just like applying the same principles and opening up to the different people. So, okay. Suppose you're alone in your company and you want to get started. So I've tried several ways, like just going talk on the water cooler to people, just get the conversation started. When I get some allies, between quotes, I start working with these people from the inside out. So I'm not talking about the strategy like, okay, now you have to work together. We set people together and they say, what do we have to do? What do we have to do? This is the approach where you get just on personal context, the thing bootstrapped. And for me personally, that has worked best. Because you find people who start sharing a common interest. So it's like when I come into a company years ago and I would do open source, I would say, oh, you need to do open source. And they would look at me, so why do you need open source? We're just fine. We don't have a problem. So you just can't convince people if they're not like aware of the problem or they don't have a feeling for the problem. So that in that perspective, if you get people who actually have a problem, you can start working together on that problem. And then when you find these people, start like a small group on Friday evening, on Monday morning, whatever, get together and announce that to the world so that others can start to join. Okay, it takes a bit of gut to do that in a company, but nobody will say we're against it. We're just talking to each other about work, which nobody can have a problem with. And we're going to talk about improving things in work, so nobody will stop you normally for that. Do you think people would stop you in your company? Would you start doing that, or are you already doing that today? Talking to people on that? I see some going like, mm-hmm. So, question for you. Sorry, I'd be so direct. What would keep you from doing that? Sorry, just the? Inertia. Okay, inertia. Okay. So the problem is not with the other. Okay. Anybody else reasons to not start this kind of thing or this communication? Okay. It's simple, but it's effective, and you are starting to have a fun time. Okay. This slide, I must say, to get the conversation started, technology is a great way. So well, whatever word you'll put on there, you're probably familiar with, and you're probably passionate about the tools. So that I found personally that people would rave about these things, like, oh, this is the next cool thing, let's go for this. So continuous delivery, 15 deploys a day, 30 deploys a day, we really need that. Okay, it's a way to get you excited and to way to get the conversation started. But in essence, we're seeking to establish trust. So we're not establishing the technology. Of course, at different levels. You can have like technology trust, where you put a bunch of things together and say, oh, I'm not sure it's going to work. I'm going to test it. I'm going to monitor it. Yes. But that's a benefit that will give you a kind of trust. It's part of your capabilities. But there's always also the human trust. So whatever tool you pick, if the other says, oh, that's a bad tool, it's not going to collaborate with you. So you have to get that trust going and get that discussion going. Of course, in some organizations, you can propose a lot of things, but to make them officially is the hard part. For that, I propose just start doing it. In my experience, when you just go over the other person, you start talking, do that. They don't stop you. People think they will be stopped, but I've never experienced that. It's very strange. So while people say management is holding the two parts of the organization away from each other, in reality, there's nobody blocking the door when you go to the other people. Did somebody ever experience that? So is it just the inertia that's stopping you and not making DevOps happening? Okay. So 13 behaviors, actions. First one, talk straight. We really need this tool. I want to learn this tool. So depending on how you pitch these things, you gain trust or not. If you're honest, that gives you a different kind of credibility. The manager saying, I need this finished by that time. But in his head, he says, oh, okay, I'll put a week before because then we still have a week to go. That's not talking straight to the people. It sure doesn't help you in gaining trust. Anybody ever experienced that? I certainly did. So then they come up to your desk, the user wants this, my boss wants this. And in reality, they want it. So they use another person as an excuse to get things done. or saying it's urgent, it's important. But I guess if you've ever done a help desk or ticketing system, you're quite familiar with that. Talk straight. Seems simple, but in reality, we're kind of twisting reality that we're not able to talk straight. But again, this really doesn't help you trust the other person. I'm not talking about talking straight like you should really take a bath or something, which is also being straight, but it's about getting the balance right on talking to people. So, or you're not performing. Some people say, oh, I'm being honest, I'm being straight with you. No, you're still humans. There's still like a factor that you need to take into account. Demonstrate respect to the other person. So we judge another person's character by how he treats people who can't help or hurt him. So you have this kind of mentality like they go to the boss and they say, oh, we'll do this. But in reality, they don't do it. Or they say, you should do this, while to the boss they say, oh, I've done this. So it's respect. It's the little things. And I found like a tweet a couple of days ago, like DevOps, before the people ended up in the commodity corner and were not respected, but now they want to be respected. Exactly the point of the behavior. Show respect to the other person. It's not, oh, it's code, that didn't work, it's shit. No, that guy probably took his time, put a lot of effort in it. Okay, that's the result, but that's not respect you show to that guy. Are you doing it better? You're saying, oh, we need version control, we need all this kind of stuff. Do you version control your monitoring scripts? Do you take backups of your own directory? Blah, blah, blah. So it's a thin line. Transparency. So there's a debate about, okay, we used to do scripting in Perl and blah, 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 and now we do whatever config management tool and so on. It doesn't really matter. As long as that code you're writing, whether it was like shell script, or whatever, as long as it's not transparent to other people, you didn't get the message. So it's just another flavor, just another way of coding, but it's about not a special thing you wrote and you're only doing. So checking your code, it's about sharing that stuff to the other people. It's not keeping it close so they won't fire you. Okay, if that's your strategy, I guess you have a larger problem than we can solve. But people tend to think like that, which shouldn't. A while ago, I was talking to Rai Pinar, and he said, well, it's easy for me. I just expose everything of a machine to the developers they want to know. So I expose the log files. I expose them the things they want to know. Whatever they want to get to, I make that happen. That's also a way of transparency. And it saves you a lot of time, believe me. Just by enabling that to make people see things in production. Because if you say, oh, you have no access to production, okay, how can they learn? How can they see what's happening? So, okay, maybe they transfer a log file and then after a while they get things. No, it's a matter of trust. Do you trust these people looking on the system? Or are you saying, I don't trust you, so you don't get access? So again, it's a trust problem. It's strange, but we think like, oh, it's a mentality not to share the things. No, if you trust people, you can give it all the rights in the world. I come at customers and they say, here's the root password of everything, because we trust you. I've never been there before, but I know these guys, and I say, this is it. They trust me not to fuck up in production. I'm not saying you have to expose these passwords because you might have regulations and so on. But if it's blocking people to do their job just because you don't trust them, you're tackling the wrong problem. You're not working on the trust. You're just restricting their access. Sorry? No. So when do you get, well, when you get punished for another people's mistake, yes, does the other one also take part of the blame or not? Mm-hmm. Which part would make you feel better? Obstructing the guy doing his job? Or thinking that you have done the right thing by giving him the root password?
Of course I would want to do the right thing, what I feel to do is the right thing. That's what I do in my job. But I can understand people that would like to trust someone else, but end up not doing them because at the end of the day, they need to cover themselves first. You know, they end up choosing between the risk because maybe they can do something else, and maybe it is not the problem. So I think there is, and it's company culture for in a lot of cases. I guess that's end up being the problem. But I think there is a lot of risk associated with that trust, and then you run your risk analysis thing and say, well, actually that is not worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
But is the point there not also you've got a trust problem then between you and your manager? You've given the root password out to somebody and they screwed up. Okay, damn it, they screwed up. But I mean, sometimes I screw up. Not very often, I hope, But when I do, I put my hand up and I say, sorry folks, I screwed up. I'll try not to do that again. And they'll say, yeah, but they trust me and they know that human beings screw up once in a while. So if I screw up with the root password, that's life. And if I give the root password to somebody else as a judgment call, I think they can handle it, and it's wrong, well, that's a screw up. I screwed up. Hands up. I shouldn't have given it to this person yet. Perhaps they weren't ready for it, or perhaps it's just human error on their part. Same story. But if your manager then is going to come around with a whip, the big trust problem is between you and your manager, and maybe you need to, maybe you need to evaluate that, and you either go, I don't like this place and I'm going to leave, or I'm going to behave in a really anal way in future and they won't get good value,
Yeah, depending on how much you can take with the culture. Yeah, so you can't change every person in your organization, but you have the option to make the decision. Sorry? Sure. But I guess in that case, so it's not, trust doesn't mean you can do everything. So it's, you still do the evaluation, whether you trust and the skills. The other one has to build up trust with you. So blind trusting is like stupid idea, but it could be by the company saying, oh, you need to blindly trust that person, but then you got like, okay, I'll do that, but this is not trust in reality. It's just saying because somebody said, give me the root password. No? So, the right wrong. So to know what is right and not do it is the worst cards. So if that other person screwed up and he didn't go tell to the boss that he screwed up, that's cowardice. But it also says when you know there's a bug in your system and you don't fix it, it's a kind of cowardice. Unless you say it and you talk about it, that you're going to fix it. But if you don't talk about it and you just say, oh, we'll manage to get by the testers, put it in production. But even if it's not by bad intent, because nobody does things by bad intent, it's just that they have a different view of the world. But when you have a problem and something screwed up, make up for it. Just by saying, I will fix this, and I will fix it very well, so it won't happen again. Loyalty. Haha. It's as difficult when things go bad that you say was the other person as saying when good was my idea. But if it was their idea, give the credits to the other person. It will get you more credibility, more trust than saying, oh, what's my idea? Stupid, but after a while when you have like those architectural discussions up front and then you build a system and so on, so, I know, it was a bright idea. No. Promote that. That person actually told you that was a good idea. Keep remembering that and bringing it up. And loyalty also means that you don't say a different thing when people are there or they're not there. You can code very well. I trust you. And then when you go away and to the other person, you say, oh, I'll never trust that guy in my life. It's also a way of loyalty. And imagine that the person you talk to, you say the same to him. So really get a feeling of trust. I don't know. People who say, I don't, the other one's bad when he's not there. I don't tend to trust these people when they talk to me. It doesn't give me a good feeling. And represent the others, so you can, at different places in, let's say, the whole process, usually the analysts and the developers talk to the customer first, and then the guys from operations and sysadmins, they kick in later when development has started, and they have to like build the system that the software is really going to run on. So it's important that even, okay, you should get those people in the discussions up front. But even somehow, if you can't make that happen, you should represent the other person's view. Like, okay, that's cool functionality, but can we operate that? Oh, let's select a product. To give you an example, I'm currently working on a project where they're selecting a framework from a development point of view. And, okay, the more expressive the framework is, the more the developers tend to like it. Oh, with 2 lines of code, pff, magic happens. Rails magic, whatever. And then they say, okay, but we have to scale for, my case, a strange case, I know, 1 million writes per second. Are you going to write that in Rails just because it makes you easy to write that code? If you just think about your part, that's going to be hard to operate. X times number of machines, blah, blah, blah. Same with the database. Oh, I'll start with MySQL. That's all integrated. I can just do it. No. So these things work together, and if you don't represent the other parts that need to take care about the application while you're discussing things, it's going to be hard to make that up later in the process. that's one of the reasons why you need to get that broad view, because either you call these people in, and if you can't call them in, just start thinking what problems they might have, and already talk about the subject, so people can see the value to bring other people in. I sometimes done some strange projects, like you all probably, that, where the service level agreement is being negotiated upfront, and then development starts, and then in the end they can only know the performance once they have the application. So it's kind of weird if you don't take that together on how you what service level agreement you can make together. That to do that up front, that feels rather strange. Okay, deliver results. I guess that's the most obvious one. But what is the result you want to get? So stepping into that arena and saying, this is how I see the result. I see a lot of people turn down new applications that come in production. They say, oh, it doesn't fulfill rule X, Y, Z. It doesn't work on our version of Tomcat. It doesn't work with our driver. It doesn't work on our operating system. Of course, it's still the transparency and share that information, but the results is also like, okay, this is the list where it needs to be on. And somehow, when you ask that list, it takes forever to get them those specs, which is kind of weird because they do it all the time. But when you say, okay, let's define now the results you expect, and they say, oh, that's kind of hard because we don't know exactly what version we're going to work on and so on. It can be a new version in a couple of months. So get that clearly defined what you want to have. Get better. So learn, unlearn, and relearn. Somebody said that he had a conversation. Said, I'm not going to learn a programming language ever. Who was it? Why shouldn't you? Why should you say that? I'm never going to use Java because I'm used to Ruby. Why is that? When you learn something, maybe there's another solution for your problem that's more efficient. So learn what you know, but unlearn when you have to. Or relearn. We've been managing our Solaris systems like this forever. Okay, things move on. There's new stuff to learn. So don't keep on doing the same thing. I'm not saying that's bad, but see what's happening in the world and how things are moving on. So maybe we used to do Pixie boot and now we're cloning or whatever. Just give you the options and learn what options you have. The feedback you need for that. Because you can try things, but okay, am I getting better? Should I continue doing that? Am I doing the right thing for you? Maybe we did it like this a year ago. It was a tweet half an hour ago, like somebody said, oh, I received a DVD with 32 megabytes of data on it. Why was that? Because we used to ship a DVD with our code to the customers. Is that still the best way? Just think about these things. It's amazing when you come into a company and you say, why are you doing this? Yeah, we don't know exactly anymore, but There used to be a reason for that. Brilliant. But do you still know the reason? No, and well, it might not be the best way, but we have been doing it like this. No, no, no. Inspect, adapt, really important. So when you do these things and you want to improve, metrics can really help. So, the system's always down. Is it? Let's look at the metrics. How long has it been down? Deployments always fail. Really? Do you capture the number of deploys that fail? Do you have the number of bugs? So, because it tends to become an emotional discussion. And there's no need if you just capture the metrics. And I find it very valuable to just break through these things on a management level and say, okay, this is what we have, and we can improve this towards that. You can say we're doing it all wrong, but we keep the system up. Okay, I'm not saying you can't fake metrics. That's another story. You don't gain trust by faking metrics, of course. But the important thing is that start monitoring the things you do, and then you know whether you're improving or not. And for that improvement, like I said, sometimes you have to change the system itself. So you might have all the great people and all the persons in the world getting together, but if you're following the same way of thinking and the same way of process of doing things, you might not improve. You might improve consistently more if you just change the system. Okay, there's one guy who needs to tick off the box because he signs off the things that go into production. Could be a good thing, but maybe by changing it in another way, the process can get you another benefit. So by not putting the responsibility in another person, but the person who has to do it, he will become scared if it's not good. So you see, things can change just by changing the system in that way. And systems thinking, if you do a map on how you currently work, can greatly show you like the loops you have in your organization, the buffers you have, and so on. So it really gets you thinking about that stuff. Reality. So to gain trust, you have to talk about reality as it is. It's not about like, you know, we're almost there. The project is 99% finished. We're close to. No. We are here. We have those bugs. This is the state we are. Okay, people tend to get optimistic at the end of a release, and other people get pessimistic at the end of a release. It's just showing the reality. And you know, if you can't show that it works, are you talking about reality or wishful thinking? Clarify the expectations. So all these deadlines and all that stuff. So the main key in that behavior is to talk to all people involved, not just thinking of your own expectations, but all people involved, their expectations. You might not agree with their expectations, but if you don't start a discussion, there's not much to be gained, because in the end, they will trust to do the thing they think they want you to have you done. But if you don't, it doesn't gain you trust. You might have an argument in the beginning on what's going to be the expectations, but it's still better than doing it at the end if it doesn't match. Practice accountability. So, similar to the problem Spike said, when something fails, you have to be able to face the truth. You have to be able to say, I screwed up. Or the other person needs to be able to say, I screwed up too. Without finger pointing. Just the ability that people could fail without saying, oh, it's your fault. Sure, it's my fault, but I will improve. And that's the most important. If they have a climate of fear where you just can't say I screwed up because they're going to fire me, that's not going to help. So the accountability is facing the truth as it is. Listen to the other person. Not define what he has to do or how he has to work. Just listen. So we talk too much, but do we ever listen too much? I don't know. It's a rare skill to see somebody listen more than he talks. But it's important because by listening, you capture the world that the other is saying, and you can start constructing the other one person's ideas. If you don't listen, and you're strong-headed, so we need to have that in place because it's the most important. If the other one doesn't want it, or the customer doesn't want it, there's no point in doing that. So listen, listen, listen. Okay. Keep commitments. That comes back to the part like we had the intent of doing these things, but did we actually do it? Did we keep the commitment? So if you say, yeah, we did it, but it's not going to help you, your people make you trust. So, of course, you don't have to overcommit. Your commitment has to have value. And things like group estimation and getting better way to estimate what you can commit to is very important. Because if you're the guy who says, yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, I'll take that. But if you don't deliver, that's hard. I know saying no is also hard, but not for you maybe. But to some people, or like the more helpful people, no, just kidding. It's hard to say no, and they screw up. Taking like the responsibility to choose between different priorities on them themselves. So once you have established that trust with people, you really have to extend it. So use the password, use the code. Everybody can check into production. Those are ways to extend the trust. Of course, you tend to lose trust points faster than you gain them. But sometimes you have to let go. Say, I can't do it all. I'll trust you to do the right thing. And the trust is not saying, I only trust these guys. Yes, but tend to grow that circle and not saying like, oh, it's the only two sysadmins who know everything and the other guys, they can't do. Oh, you can't touch that part of the code base because we don't trust you to touch the core of the product. Okay, if that is a problem and you don't trust them, work on that trust problem with the other people. Like, get them into the work, get them into the code, and explain these things, and start working so you can start trusting these people. Which is not very usual to do that. But it really helps you make that part of the job happen. So as a person, I have my capabilities, and I want to practice these certain behaviors. And I want to help others to practice those behaviors. Does that make sense? Is there any DevOps specifics in that? No. It's a trust problem. I told you I'm not going to write like a DevOps way of working. It's basic things like other people have said on a human level. It's just that we're not used to thinking in that world about these things. So, and I see your job as a manager to encourage that behavior, to increase that trust. Because you know that if you increase trust, you get the things done, and that costs less, and you get more credibility to doing that stuff. So, bootstrapping a culture, that's hard. So just start by doing that kind of behavior and get people involved to do the same behavior. And once you get few people can be trusted, you will get things done. And that's how people will see that it works. Just by saying and having the intentions, that's not going to buy you credibility. By doing these things and making the results visible, that's going to be the changer of the mentality. Organizational trust, the third level. So, redundancy. We're rewriting the monitoring scripts because we can't reuse the testing scripts. Why should you? Isn't that a form of redundancy? I know, we usually think about redundancy like filling in forms and whatever, but this is also a kind of redundancy. Should we? Bureaucracy. If you want to have a new server, please go to our form online and fill blah, blah, blah in, and we'll take it. Or fill in the ticketing system. Okay. I'm not saying these are bad ideas, but sometimes they're very bureaucratically used, just for slowing down the number of requests you get into the system. And then say, oh, it's in the system. Oh, it's good. You can move on to other things. Politics. Yeah, I don't have to talk about that. You all know that. Is that getting past the politics is a hard thing, but getting that trust already on a relational level and expanding that trust will normally downplay the politics in things. Because politics is often when there is no trust, or people don't talk straight, or they don't do transparency, and all that stuff. The fact that people quit and stay, and that's people leaving the company, and customers come and going, and so on. I'm not talking about fraud. But, of course, there are taxes that won't help. There's a list of books that you can, obviously the one I've been now quoting about today, The Speed of Trust, that can help you. There's others like The Lean Startup, especially on the eliminating waste and stuff. The Goal for systems thinking, and Against the Method. I don't know if somebody knows that book. It has nothing to do with IT, but it's a book where you have a person with a new idea, how hard it is to introduce it into an academic world. So even if he has like the most brilliant idea and it's really working, they ask him proof about whether he actually can do it. And they ask him more proof than traditional companies have to prove in the world. Kanban, if you want to look at visualizing, making things transparent, working on your workflow, that's also an interesting read. A bit more technical, but still there's a lot of peaks about collaboration between the different culture in that book, Continuous Delivery. There's the Web Operations book, which is more like a part of essays about different subjects. But apart from the technical stuff, there's also a lot of human culture there too. And there's the Visible Ops book, which in a way is also about gaining trust in your company. And of course, if you want to know more on DevOps specific, there's a lot going on these websites or mailing lists. But let's say on the cultural part or the mentality, I would advise you to look at Agile in general and other ways of thinking, like system thinking and Kanban and so on, that really gets you into those ideas. Just for information, the first group I found very starting to be inclusive about the DevOps ideas is the Kanban group, where there is now a Kanban Ops group. And David Anderson is very committed to get into the DevOps way of thinking. So I think it's a good sign that they start being inclusive, because in the end, we don't want to be a special group. We just want to collaborate with the other people. So breathe in, inspiration, and I hope that the answer for you is now that you can start bootstrapping that mentality. Any questions? Yes, maybe you can get the mic. Okay.
So I guess I have two questions. In one case, well, first of all, I think this is great, and you're making a great service to everybody to have these kind of things. I think the cultural aspect of it, it is very, very important. The thing is that, as you said, this might not be even specific to DevOps. It's a human thing. So if it's a human thing, could you push it one step further and say that it is a society thing? I mean, a company at the end of the day is just a smaller microcosm. And part of me thinks that as a culture, like for example, we're talking about making mistakes and sort of taking ownership of even the mistakes. As a society, we stigmatize mistakes. Making mistakes is bad. And if you can get away without admitting a mistake, then you are the cool kid. So you kind of, I guess, we get from society all these sort of behaviors, and we bring them into companies.
Yes, but we also see a movement, let's say by social networks, of people getting together and starting on a specific idea and working together. So where in the past it was more like a divide and conquer because people couldn't talk to each other, you see the same trend with the social networks, that people can't control you anymore if you start talking to each other. So culture goes two ways. So on the one hand, people say, okay, you're accountable and you're not allowed to fail. But then in the end, what I see with younger people, they are less scared about failing than we used to be. But might be my experience.
No, I guess so. I agree. Which kind of ties in the next question. So would you think that it is possible to initiate a change bottom up without, like in a lot of cases, even for Agile, say I want to do, introduce some Agile practices, you need management buy-in. Otherwise it won't work. So can you do a cultural change without manager buy-in? Can you from the bottom up start to talk to people and cause that cultural change without your manager actually buying in, and when someone makes a mistake, don't come and blame you. Or, you know, the kind of, to go back to even to the example, like, can it be done? Can you really initiate that change from the bottom up?
Well, I'm not saying it's easy to introduce that into a company, but if your question is, can you start from the bottom up and will it always work? I can tell you, but at least you started bottom up and you tried to make it happen.
But you think it has a reasonable chance of being successful?
Sure. If you show actions, your actions have results, they will listen. Yeah. But I've seen also Agile being introduced only from the top and not being successful because it was only introduced at the top. So ideally, you go two ways and you not only have buy-in or trust from maybe your direct colleagues, but also from management. So, but start exploring and finding allies at the management level is also one of the things you need to do. And once you have that, it gets a lot easier. But results are what make also management trust you when you have the results that do things. But people can still decide and make the wrong decision. You have to allow them to fail. But trying it is the most important, I guess. Another question? I guess that ties into the fact that you introduced those open source or whatever solutions when they had a problem, and that made them think. And that's what I said in the beginning, if they don't see the problem. So if let's say they have no financial problems in the company, and for them, customer is satisfied, will you go up to them and say, oh, we're going to change the way we work. Let's do DevOps. It won't ring a bell with them. Sure, yeah. And when you go to a bank and they say, whoa, what can we gain? A tiny, tiny, tiny %? Why should we change? We'll just make a new product and we'll gain more money instead of you optimizing. Yes. Okay.
You mentioned system thinking and also responsibility. And there's something in system thinking that suggests that the behavior that you'll see in organizations, at least in part, determined by structure. And I think there's maybe something that hasn't been spoken about. You've touched on it a bit, but you've only hinted at it, which is the structure of incentives within organizations. So, putting it very, very crudely, you might have operations who have incentives around operational safety and reliability, and development, separate reporting chain who are incentivized right up to senior management on speed, if you like, of development to the point of operations. Take a thought experiment and try reversing the accountability if you make operations folk accountable for speed of development and development folk accountable for the safety of operations. That would be a structural organizational change that might do a little bit more to implement the change that we're talking about here, often in terms of, I don't know, some sort of personal buddy-buddy kind of dynamic.
Sure. So getting the incentives right to make it work. I personally experienced the same problem, like was even within the only group of the admins You're responsible for the operating system layer. You're responsible for the storage layer. Okay, you see? And then getting people work together and say, oh, I'll trust nobody to touch my part because my incentive is depending on that being done right. But at that company, the belief was that this is the kind of accountability that they should have put in place. I must say the results were what you would expect with that structure in place. Like nobody was able to do anything on another layer, and everybody was becoming a bottleneck in the process. So you had like, you can beautifully visualize that with Kanban. You said like, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, what did you solve? Not much. So, but I agree, the structure where you work in, which is kind of the third level organizational trust, you get in place by putting the right structure of incentives and responsibilities in place. Sure. Yeah.
This methodology seems like something that's come out of what I would call new companies, web companies, where you control every layer of the stack. I work in an environment where we outsource a great deal of ops work on price and on competency. What chance of organizations that have done that not successfully finding a way to concentrate on it?
So if you work with kind of outsourcing or things people you don't have direct contact with, over the years I've done that kind of jobs too, at the same customer, and what I saw, it's being what do you call it, a pendulum. Like they outsource everything, and then they say, oh, we can't always trust these guys, and then it comes back. But it can stay there if these people can trust and get a good communication channel and so on. But I usually see it like a kind of swinging back to, let's say, oh, that part, we need to have people on premises and need to talk to them. Of course, if your only concern is price, and that's what gives you the difference in value on the market, I don't see that price should be a reason not to communicate and not to have trust. But I know that some companies put their pricing so low and then just give you crap because they only have budget X. I've been in that kind of project too, and then I go up to the marketing guys and I say, okay, I have no problem for you people to lower the price to get the sales done, but it should not be, you should, the part you skipped in the budget of doing that project should still be there. It could be like a financial or a business gesture to say, oh, I'll go well below because I buy market share or whatever. But in the end, the discussions will start if they give you a crap service. No? Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a fair amount of experience with outsources, not outsourcing myself, but you know, working with outsourced teams and so on. And I mean, it's a very good example of the systems thinking and so on. And if for example, you have a contract which says they'll be paid by the number of tickets they solve, I put in a request to an outsourced team just last week, and I said, could you edit these 30 files and remove these 800 lines? And they said, could you raise a ticket for each of those lines, please? And I said, no. But
Yeah.
there was clearly a sort of mismatch there, which someone hadn't thought through when signing a contract. But what I do find is that when you start out in a relationship like that, it comes back to the trust thing of at first they're thinking we might only have this contract for a year, and we're incented by the number of tickets we sign off, etc. But after a couple of years, if you get a working relationship, people actually respond to the fact that you trust them and that you're giving them real problems, not just do this, do this, do this. You know, you sometimes say to them, we seem to be doing this a lot, could you have a look and see how we can fix it? And the first time you do that, they're thinking, hang on, but then I won't get any more tickets. And so you've got to overcome that barrier. But after a while, they get used to the idea that actually they do that. That you don't cut the contract because they've solved your big problem. They get more interesting work, and you renew the contract because they're solving your problems, not because they're doing lots of tickets.
I have a question for you. Would you have filled those, was it 30 forms, if you knew they were going to deliver?
I did. It did cross my mind that I could have written a script to submit 800 forms by jamming the web, so it would have been more grief.
Well,
for
to me
in the long
personally, it
run.
would make a difference. If, well, I would say like, they have the instructions from their boss that it needs to be filled in. I would be happy to fill it in if I would be certain that it would give that results. Even if it would be painful for me, I would still, they would not break my trust in them. But if I have to fill it in and they don't deliver, then I would have a problem with it.
It wouldn't have made anyone's life easier if I'd...
Sure. Any more questions?
I come from Brighton, so you will excuse me. Should we factor in happiness? Like, if you have an environment where you can't trust your colleagues, surely you aren't gonna be that happy about that and about working in that place. And I've come across they've started this thing called GNH, Gross National Happiness, to replace GDP, and someone has taken that and has converted in CHA, Customer Happiness Index, which can also be applied to employees. And some companies are trying to take into account as a benefit, as a gain, where is the incentive? Happy employees. And to me, part of this movement also can have an impact in that sense.
I've seen, but I can't recall the exact name, about visualizing that happiness next to your user stories. So you have a burn down chart about how things are going, but next to it you visualize your happiness factor about that day. And then at the retrospective you see what happened that day and what made you unhappy, and you start working on that. So it's not the exact thing, but yeah, there's a name for it, and it's just a simple visualization, but you just put it next to the board, and every sprint you evaluate the happiness of that week or sprint or whatever. Okay. More questions? That's a good question. I wouldn't know. Would you? Okay, thank you very much for coming.